Hello there, I'm Loudon Stearns with Berklee Online, and I'm going to be talking about how to use the Roland GAIA SH-01 synthesizer to teach with. This is a great classroom synthesizer because how well laid out it is. The diagrams on the synthesizer look great, and everything is really well organized. It's just obvious what's going on. I really like it because we don't need to look at the computer the whole time. As a teacher, we can just have a classroom full of these, and you can kind of just let people aren't kind of focused on their computer, they're really focused on the device. It really feels like an instrument that way. So the first thing when teaching with synthesis in general, and particularly with this synthesizer, is having a really good starting point. So that way, as you're instructing the class and how to adjust the parameters, we've all started from the same point, and they're going to be hearing the same things that you're hearing. So the first thing I like to do, and you'll find this in the Roland sound guides as well, is to kind of initialize the patch in the very beginning. And actually going over this with the students can really help because as you're going through these parameters and setting up just the default patch, you're kind of starting to educate about what the synthesizer is and how it's laid out. So the first thing usually you're going to do is hold the shift, cancel, and right buttons at the same time. And that will initialize the patch, and it's going to turn off tones 2 and 3. So just tone 1 is playing. And I think when really first getting into synthesis and with this synthesizer, we really want to think about having a very simple polyphonic synth, but it's just using a single oscillator, filter, and amplifier. We're not engaging the other tones, which really can be confusing if they're running. So this is what we want. Now, you're also going to have to move the faders into the correct kind of initial locations when doing this. So this is set up right now how the default's going to be. And if you look at the GAIA software, you'll see when you do initialize it, it shows you right in the software where everything should be set up. So it's worth kind of having a look at that and setting it up the same exact way on your synth. Really what you're doing is you're setting all the modulation to be 0, right? So your LFO depths are all at 0, your envelope depths are both at 0, which is in the middle there, and your sustain levels are all the way up on your envelopes. Your filter cutoff is going to be all the way up and resonance all the way down, and then your main levels will be all the way up. And so that's like the default kind of starting point. And with that configured, I'd like to talk a bit about just the layout of the synthesizer. We see that the sound path, which is the oscillator into the filter and then into the amplifier, is all like a dark yellow color. And then our modulation, which is our LFO here, is a blue, and we see that that does control the pulse width modulation. So colors are really well used in this to kind of differentiate the different parts of the synthesizer. Right now, we have one tone playing. It's going to be a single oscillator. It's going to be a sawtooth waveform, which we can see is lit up right there. And it's going to be a low-pass filter with the cutoff frequency all the way up. And with that, we'll be ready to go. But I'd like to point out a couple things that function with the shift button that don't initialize when you do initialize the patch. This can cause confusion if the students have changed something. When you hold shift down on this device, it gives you a bunch of other parameters that you can adjust. And an important one is this key hold button right here. And that turns on and off velocity sensitivity on the keyboard, which can be confusing. Usually when teaching, I'll leave that on so that it's a set velocity or fixed velocity across the keyboard. But when using this as a keyboard controller, usually you want to turn that off so you do get velocity variation on the MIDI output and for the internal synthesis. A kind of nice feature with that shift also is the tempo sync button there on the LFO will change it between restart and not, which is a really nice feature to have access to. So with ourselves set to the default setup, we'll be ready to kind of play in here and maybe set up our first patch.